Monday, July 14th, the day after the Club World Cup ended. Want to ask the big question of the day. Now that it's over, was the Club World Cup a success? And to delve into this conversation and question, joined by content creator Jack Grimse. Welcome in. Thank you for joining us here on Morning Kickaround, sir.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate you guys having me. Excited to be here. Excited about what you're doing, helping grow the game over in the States. You know, it's crazy. The Club World Cup just wrapped up, and the World Cup is like less than a year away. So I think everybody's kind of thinking about that. That's like the big question, big picture thing. Is the sport growing in America? I've seen some polls, are you more excited about the World Cup now since the Club World Cup has happened? And I think for some reasons I am, and for some reasons I still am, but I can see why some people would not be. Probably like the traffic, or I've seen all those TikToks of people running to MetLife Stadium as the game started, and there's just huge traffic. I've been there. I've been on a bus that died on the way to East Rutherford. It was actually for the Madrid derby, the ICC 2019, when I was working that. But luckily, they got it restarted and was still there in plenty of time. But there's so much going on. And was the Club World Cup a success, I guess? Was that your question?
Yes,
depends
sir.
who you ask. Like for Chelsea, they got a huge bailout. They fixed their finances during this summer, which maybe this has given them the chance. I heard you guys talking a little bit ago. It will propel them on in the Premier League. But yeah, sorry, I'm not going to hog
Well,
your
no,
head.
it's interesting you bring that up. Like, did they fix their finances, or did they just massage their finances in a way that means regulators aren't going to drop the hammer on them? I don't know. We don't have to get into the weeds of that, Jack. I mean, this is and I would love to get your perspective on this, as somebody who is engaged in bringing fans together, reaching out to fans on behalf of various clubs and organizations and things like that. Like in your job, is it difficult to sort of dodge some of the landmines that football has created for us? That we are, when we talk about financial fair play and PSR and some of the shadiness of FIFA and
Human rights.
the human rights elements are part of that World Cup conversation, right?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty funny that Sepp Blatter was weighing in about the moral state of the game recently, because he's certainly one to talk. So whether or not the game is making these landmines and these headaches and pitfalls for ourselves, that's something that there's only so much we can control. So I like to focus a little bit more on the positive side of the game. Some of the fans that are being brought together, some of these opportunities to whether it's this summer to see some of your favorite players up close in America, because that's not something we always get a chance to do, or some of the amazing stories that are happening in our country, in our own backyard, like Vermont Green. And I heard you guys talking a little bit both earlier today and other days about these summer teams and how that really can be growing the game on a grassroots level, probably more so than someone who's a huge Cole Palmer fanboy that just gets to see Cole for 2 seconds at training. What are these communities? What is it like being a season ticket holder, even if it's for only 8 matches a year?
Do you think that do you think that there's a gap? Do you think there's a disconnect between sort of fans who engage with the game at the highest levels, largely through social media, largely through, video clips or whatever? I mean, I've been at these conferences where people talk about how younger fans engage with the game in a different way than older fans did, Jack. I mean, do you think there's and then again, grassroots versus, we're talking about a team that spent £1 billion on their squad and they win a Club World Cup. And then obviously, we've got Robert, who works with a team that's got some college kids just wanting to play some extra soccer in the summer. And I don't know, is there a gap between those communities, or do you think we're all kind of in the same group?
Maybe we're in the same, I don't know, village is not a right word for it, probably because some of it is so big, but we're in the same place, but maybe we're in the same movie theater and we're just seeing different films, and some people are seeing a little indie film and some people are seeing the huge F1 in IMAX 4D. So maybe that's a good analogy for it. But I think it's great because like now soccer is getting to a place where there is almost something for everyone. There are some Premier League fans that probably don't watch any games and they consume highlights, or they just follow transfers, or they're just playing FIFA Ultimate Team and building their super squads. But there are some people who are not going to watch any Premier League games and they're going to go out to support their local team. And could those people meet and have a meaningful conversation about the game? Probably to some extent, but some of it is about the experience. Some of it is, just the daily news cycle grind, and what's the water cooler chat, like what's important to you. So I think it's kind of cool how there's those different avenues.
From your perspective, from the work that you're doing, what have been some of the more compelling threads or conversations or topics that you've enjoyed in your side?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I think there's so many different ways I could go with this, but something I was doing was helping Aston Villa launch their USA Instagram account, and every year there's a North America meetup for fan clubs across the country. So whether you're supporters in Chicago, New York, or Boston, San Diego, San Francisco, every year all of these people are coming to one fan club's home bar, whether that's in Seattle, it was a couple years ago, Toronto, this year was in Charlotte. So kind of meeting everybody, hearing their stories, whether they're third generation Brummie or somebody who's just from Ohio that started playing with Aston Villa in FIFA and is now following the club very passionately. Like for me, it's really cool to see how that fandom develops organically, especially for me. Like growing up, I was really into American sports, played soccer until I was 10, but didn't really have any family connections, didn't understand the game, didn't understand the tactics, didn't understand why I had to keep running around, never got to the ball, and it was like 90 degrees out. I'm like, I'm just gonna stick with baseball where I can actually hit this thing. So, seeing how the game develops, seeing people's individual stories and connections, and really how like the rest of the world consumes this sport is really cool.
I think that, from my perspective, very similar to you. Grew up, played a little bit of soccer. Family didn't have any connection to it. Kind of dropped the thread later on because I was focused on baseball and other things. But when I think about, I used to do a radio show that was American soccer focused. And what I would say sometimes is that even if I was talking about the Premier League, or even if I was talking about something that happened outside the United States, it's still American soccer in the sense that there are fans of every type of soccer that are living this country. In the United States of America, we have a representation for pretty much every league you could think of, right? Which I think is incredible. It does create, again, problems maybe communicating between these groups or connecting them at times. I do also think that we have a division, Jack, between Spanish-speaking soccer fans and English-speaking soccer fans in America.
I mean, of course, like Liga MX, people are always surprised when I say, what's the most watched league in the United States? And it's probably primarily when I'm talking to Europeans and they're like MLS or Premier League, and like, no, it's Liga MX.
Yeah, exactly that. And that thing about you, what you're saying about, connecting Aston Villa fans, the American Aston Villa community, and that part of it, like how do you see the established Villa fans responding to the new one, just since that's your direct experience in building this fan base in America? Because that soccer fans can be very gatekeepy. Even new soccer fans can be very gatekeepy about who gets to be a fan or who gets to feel connected to a club or a team.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit territorial, like I think for every club, because you see these stories of Americans coming in and buying up the tickets or something. But I don't, especially for Villa, I don't think that's a huge reality. I don't think it's like a Manchester United where there's thousands of tourists at the game every week. So my experience has been really overwhelmingly positive. People who, maybe they were listening to my podcast 10 years ago and they just wanted a different perspective, or they remember some of the darker days of the club 8 years ago or so. And, so it's been really great to meet people when I'm over there at the stadium, or there's even a group that comes to the meetup every year from Kidderminster, which is like 30 miles down the road from Birmingham. So even those people who are traditional local fans have embraced the American community, and they're like, okay, well, great. You're on the same team as us. You're supporting and following along with us. Here's some of our history, some of our lore that's only kind of been passed down verbally.
But I think, sorry, Rob, but I think some of the, maybe especially, I can speak from the American side, but I imagine this is, FC United of Manchester, which kind of came out of the Sky Sports deal and the changes that came to the Premier League in Manchester United. But this is, there may even be, and I guess you could argue that Wrexham is kind of this story in a way, even though it's obviously got big money backers and famous people behind it. But is there a reaction to sort of the globalization of the game, the way that, FIFA, UEFA, some of these organizations are acting, maybe in the Premier League? Obviously, La Liga has talked about taking games outside of Spain and playing them in the United States. Like, is there a reaction to that is maybe helping people connect more locally. And even if Villa, which is a Premier League club and obviously going through a good phase of success in that league, those fans recognize, like, that's not what our club is. What our club is the local connection, the thing that brings us together as community.
Exactly. And I think that's an interesting point you raise. Are fans going to embrace modern football or look for more local, more community? And there's kind of two ways you can go. And you can go and you can watch every match on TV. You can embrace the Club World Cup, or there's some people, I don't think there's too many of them, or maybe they're just not the ones who are talking about it online because they weren't looking for that anyway, but they're going to find their local FC United of Manchester. They're going to support their 5th division side, that they can go and be a meaningful part in the community. Maybe they volunteer there. Maybe they are involved in the club, or, there's tons of ways that you can really support and make an impact at that level where you feel like just a customer. They're wringing every last drop of sweat out of you.
With to kind of turn our focus here on the American soccer conversation, the biggest news of the year outside of these tournaments and whatnot has been USL's kind of groundbreaking announcements. First, talking about the Division One announcement to try to make a parallel to Major League Soccer, and in the kind of the storm of excitement there brought the ushered in the announcement of promotion relegation coming to the USL system. And so there has been kind of a buzz in the lower leagues, and more USL 1 teams are being created, and these smaller teams are kind of becoming some of the more interesting stories, like small pockets of excitement spread across larger parts in different places. How do you think that's going to impact your work covering the game?
I mean, if there's more soccer, that's probably a good thing, right? There's more people that are interested in the game, more advertisers, more clubs, and the ecosystem just kind of grows. But I think it's really interesting because if you look at the foundation of the sport and how the open system has allowed for the interchange and facilitation of clubs moving up and down the league ladder, you are going to face different opponents. I think that's kind of been one of the competitive foundational aspects of why the game has been so successful in Europe. And obviously, like, recognizing the history of the American soccer system, and you can't just plow in millions of dollars to start something up and then have your investment go poof. So at the same time, like, I understand why MLS has been closed, but I wonder if the open system is going to generate almost a different type of fandom that really challenges the status quo.
Let me get a little inside baseball, I guess is a good way to say it, with you, Jack, on your career, your efforts to grow your particular reach. And then obviously, I mean, like, that's all tied in, as you said, to investment in the game. And obviously with the World Cup coming in 2026, I think anybody, especially those of us who work full time in soccer, are thinking, okay, how do we get this going? Not just for ourselves, but obviously how do we sort of maximize this for American soccer? Have you seen, what is your sense of sort of when there may be a sort of a boom in attention around the sport as we get closer to 26? What is your sense for sort of how investment might change or is changing around to engage with people like you or anything else that's out there in soccer media?
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of, like, at least fan sentiment, I think it was maybe last year when I just started noticing a ton of kids wearing Messi shirts. And I'm like, it didn't happen overnight, but it almost felt like it did, because it's like, all right, the parents they were watching SportsCenter, but they weren't seeing as much of Messi. And now he's all over your TV and the kids want that Messi shirt. So, like, the attention is shifting. I think for the younger generation, I would say, like, the cool sports to follow are, like, probably soccer and F1, right? So there's like a lot of that attention that's being shifted there. And, while that audience doesn't necessarily have the spending power yet, that's what advertisers are wanting to buy. They're trying to get that attention. And, like, following up on the World Cup, it's interesting, right? Because it's like all the fandom is driven by these countries. That's why I was kind of curious about the Club World Cup. It's like, are these clubs having a strong enough pull in the US to draw these fans to the game, or to draw them closer to the game? Are these national teams, we know which national teams are going to be a really big draw here. We know some of them just are not, due to logistics or, even though a ton of people live here that immigrated from that country, like they just don't have as big of a presence as some others. But I don't know how that will impact the USL 1, the USL 2, these clubs that are very grassroots level compared to the shininess of France and their star-studded squad.
Yeah, certainly interesting. We'll see. Speaking of the Messi, the explosion in Messi jerseys and full kits on kids. Little kids can get away with full kits in public, as adults really can't. Yeah, I head to church on a Sunday and see kids running around in Messi shirts at church is always an interesting thing for me. Jack Grimse, Jack, tell us where we can find all your stuff that you're working on right now.
Yeah, you can find me here on YouTube, Jack Grimse. I'm also on TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, and yeah, so trying to, I think like you guys know, following Aston Villa from the American perspective, building my shirt collection, trying to tell some fun stories, whether they're about kits or if it's something unique that's happening in Georgia or happening in Germany. I'm just a huge fan of the game and always try to have fun with it and, engage with people authentically. I think it's really fun to hear about other people's perspectives, how they became a fan, and really what's interesting to them within the game.
Well, Jack, thank you so much for spending the time with us here on Morning Kickaround. Thank you so much for your experience and sharing your perspective of the game and the summer of soccer that was, and interested to see what you do next and how you turn your attention following the afterglow of the Club World Cup and our exploits of our summer of soccer. Before we move on, I did want to put some comments on the screen. Nate, member, MK Ultra, this show's opened my eyes to local soccer scene in the U.S. Pretty cool stuff. And then Riverside Grove local soccer will ultimately be the medium that makes soccer big in this country. Affordable, community-centered game day experience has always been what makes soccer the world's game. And you had a great analogy, Jack, before you go. The movie theater, maybe we're all going to the same multiplex. Some are seeing the big, glossy, big studio release, and others seeing independent films. And hopefully this show is the theater lobby where all of those groups meet up and discuss, and maybe they all meet and then go to the same show together eventually. But thank you, Jack. And we're going to take a quick break, come right back with the final segment of Monday's Morning Kickaround.
Yeah,